What's happening, guys? Scott Bancroft here. Welcome back to another video. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and I hope you went out and took some photos. I'm going to be telling you today why you shouldn't be deleting any photos from your camera until you've given it a good look on the computer and given it some sort of edit. There are so many times that I look at the back screen of my camera, and I know you do this as well. You look and think to yourself, what on earth have I taken? And it's like, it's not exactly the photo I was going for. But please don't delete it straight from your camera. Put it on your iPad or laptop and give it a quick edit. You'll find, like I said in my previous video, shadows are so much easier to recover than highlights. So all those underexposed subjects or cityscapes, you probably have a good chance of recovering that detail. I'm going to show you exactly why. Yesterday I went out to the Kangaroo Point Cliffs for this very reason. I knew the sun was going to set behind the cityscape and it was going to create an extremely backlit situation. And I took a couple of photos, no tripod, just single shots, and I'm going to show you how I edit and bring out the detail in the dark subject. So let's head over into Lightroom now and edit one of these backlit photos that I took at the Kangaroo Point Cliffs. So I've just loaded up into the new Lightroom Classic now. There was an update a couple of days ago and it brings out a couple of new features that I really like. So for you to be able to follow along with this, go download the new Lightroom Classic from the Creative Cloud and you'll have the same features that I do. But if you don't, or you haven't been able to update it, you're still going to be able to do this because it's in the basic panel that will be working. So I've got 6 photos loaded up into Lightroom of the different stages of light from when the sun was still above the horizon to just after it's set. And you can see as I'm clicking through all these photos, the sky is completely exposed for, but the foreground or the subject does look rather dark. The photo we're going to be working with today is the landscape of Brisbane City with the tree coming through the top right. Not the best composition I've taken, but it does the job to show you that we've got an exposed sky and a dark foreground or cityscape. The first thing I do in these situations, I remove the chromatic aberration and I enable lens profile corrections like I do in every photo. Now with this situation, I'm not going to adjust the temperature and tint just yet. I just want to see how much detail I can actually recover from the dark areas. And to do this, I'm going to grab the exposure slider and I'm going to slide it all the way to the right to see how much detail I can actually pull out of those shadows. And looking at that, all that detail is completely recoverable. So I'm going to double click the exposure slider to reset that. And now I know I can edit this photo completely without any blown out pixels. I really want to represent the golden hour that was there last night, so I'm going to bring up the temperature and I'm going to increase the tint ever so slightly to introduce some more magenta tones into the sky. I'm going to boost the exposure just a little so I can see what I'm working with, and I can always bring it down later once the shadows have recovered. I'm going to leave the contrast where it is for now, and I'm going to bring the highlights down slightly. I'm not going to bring the highlights all the way down to -100, and I'll show you why. It's going to desaturate the sky but add really harsh saturation gradients into that yellow by the sun. All I'm doing is bringing the highlights down till there's no more clipping in the photo, and you can see that in the histogram. The top right triangle of the histogram will show me where there's highlight clipping. So all I'm doing is bringing the highlights down till that triangle disappears. Now this is where the magic's going to happen with these underexposed foregrounds or subjects. Let's bring the shadows up and we can really see all that beautiful detail coming out, and it's not affecting the highlights at all. And that's looking quite nice there at around 90. Because the photo's looking quite bright now, I can re-bring that exposure back down to where it was. Let's press the backslash key now and see what we started with. You can see the cityscape is super dark, but our sky is nicely exposed for. And if I'm standing there with family and friends and they ask me to see the photo I just took, I'd probably feel a little bit embarrassed and delete it straight away, and I'd pretend I never took the photo in the first place. But now you know you don't have to feel that, and you can explain to them how the camera works, that shadows are super easy to recover. By pressing the backslash key again, we can see the potential within the photo. And this is just using the 3 basic sliders: exposure, highlights, and shadows. So let's continue back into Lightroom now and continue editing this photo, and I'll show you how nice it really does come up. I'm going to press and hold the Option key and slide the white slider to the right so I can pick the white point, and this is showing me which pixels are completely white. I'm now going to slide the black slider by holding Option and sliding it to the left and finding the black point, and this is going to show me which pixels in the photo are completely dark. Now this is going to give me a nice dynamic range of light and dark pixels within the photo, bringing out that natural contrast. We didn't have to touch the contrast slider and it's popping right out of the screen. I'm looking at it though, I can bring those highlights down a tad because it's clipping again, but I might just boost that overall exposure up by about 0.5 and now it's looking quite reasonable. I might take this into Photoshop to continue editing, so I always just boost that vibrance by about +4 and it gives me a nice base to color correct on in Photoshop. Now this is where personal preference comes in. I'm really happy with how the colors are looking, the green's nice in the trees, the orange hue in the clouds is matching what the sun's producing, and I really like that little lens flare popping up just behind the cranes. That's where they're going to be building the new casino in South Bank, which is actually going to look really cool. Now I'm going to slide all the way down now to the geometry panel so I can see that the two tallest buildings are leaning into each other. And that's a clear indication that I was using a wide angle lens looking up above the horizon. If you look up with a wide angle lens, your buildings or any tall objects are going to lean into each other. If you're looking down with a wide angle lens, any tall objects are going to be bending away from each other. And that's just how the lens is receiving that light and displaying it on the sensor. Now Lightroom's super nifty. It's going to identify any vertical lines that should be there, and by pressing vertical on the transform panel, it's going to straighten them up. But the only downside is a little bit of cropping is going to happen, which you can see here. What Lightroom has done is it's pulled the bottom corners and pulled them into the photo to straighten those buildings. Now you can go into Photoshop and use the clone stamp tool that I showed in the last video and actually recreate most of those pixels without anyone really knowing that you did that. But I want to put it on Instagram, so I'm going to crop it to a 4:5 portrait photo, and I'm just going to select the nice part of the photo that's already there. Now that I can see what it's cropped to, I'm just going to shift up. I might add a touch more sharpening, and for the purpose, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of noise reduction in case there is any grain within the photo that somebody may zoom into. And that's looking really nice. Now what I'm going to do to enhance a bit more of that sun and give it that pop is put a gradient radial filter onto this photo. It's essentially a gradient filter in a circle. And I'm going to align it with the center. I'm going to bring it out just so it covers some of these buildings. Golden hour light isn't harsh at all. It bounces off objects and it's diffused through the particles in the air, and it gives soft golden light around anything it touches. So let's add this radial filter. Let's boost that temperature just a little and add a bit more exposure. And there you can see it's really brought out that golden lens flare and it's bouncing off those buildings quite nicely. Now the final little tweak I'm going to do is I'm going to add a gradient filter from the top right to the bottom left, just covering the top right tree. I'm going to show you a really cool trick to mask out those leaves without having to use the brush tool. So let's create that gradient filter and press O to see where it's affecting. If we scroll down in the gradient filters panel, we can use range mask, and let's select luminance. So this is going to mask it based off the luminance or the light value within that selection. And as those tree leaves and branches are significantly darker than the sky, it should be fairly easy to mask out. Let's click show luminance mask and it should come up as red. And now we can bring that slider from the right hand side and bring it to the left. The area I'm selecting is the darker pixels. If you wanted to do the opposite and select the sky, you would select the brighter pixels on the right hand side. So let's slide that slider all the way to the left and make it about 0/12. And that's really highlighting those tree leaves and branches quite nicely. Let's boost those shadows to bring out the detail within the leaves and reintroduce that golden hour light reflecting off them by bringing up the temperature. And now that's looking really nice. By pressing done, we can see our final photo. Let's compare it back to what we started with by pressing backslash again, and you can see it looks completely different. So now that you know how powerful Lightroom is, you're going to rethink deleting those photos on the first glance. So if you have deleted them, see if you can rescue them from your trash and see what you can do with your photos. You'll be surprised how much detail you can actually recover. And all of this is possible on the mobile version of Lightroom, and it's all for free. So let's have a look at that original photo one last time by pressing the backslash key, and we can see how it went from a dark photo that you would probably throw away if you didn't know how powerful Lightroom was, to one that looks actually really nice. So I'm gonna go export that now, and it's gonna be ready to post on Instagram. And that's about it for today. If you liked today's video, hit that like button, subscribe if you wanna come back for more videos, see me on Instagram or ring the bell to be notified, and I'll see you guys in the next video.